Alright guys, this is going to be my third take at this, so if I rush through it, I'm sorry, but I'm repeating myself a few times here. So we're going to talk about the Great War. In this picture here, we have British soldiers with their helmets, and you can see the desolate wasteland behind, which is characteristic of World War One. So this is a topic that you guys really wanted me to discuss with you. However, in the Regents, it's not so much of an important issue. What's more important is going to be the befores and afters, so we're going to focus on that in this video, and hopefully you can have a better understanding of what the outcomes are and what led to World War One. And it's very simple when we break it down by the main causes. So if you're filling out your vocab sheets or your packets, here's the key information you should write down to take notes on. We have trench warfare, the main causes, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Treaty of Versailles, technological advancements, and the League of Nations. In this picture, we have French soldiers, as you can tell, with their helmets, and you can see how dirty and decrepit this lifestyle is, and they had to fight like this for many years. Well, okay, so 4 to 5 years, but it's still, that's longer than you want to be for even one day. So let's move on with this, and we're talking about the main causes here. So main causes stands for the militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism that led to World War One in the first place, with the spark of World War One being the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. So when we talk about militarism, these countries were spending a ton of money on the weapons that were involved, as well as the soldiers and the training. And when you have all these items and you spend all this money on them, you're going to want to use them. And they were both egging each other on to see who was going to use theirs first, basically. The alliances, the alliance system is like what's pictured here in the political cartoon in the top middle of the screen here, with Serbia being a little country. If you touch me, and then it goes all the way down to Austria, Russia, Germany, France, and England. And we can see quickly how this turns into a global war instead of just a regional conflict. Imperialism. So a cat knocking at the door. All right, let's second. That's you, Fannis. Get out of here. I'm gonna walk in and knock my shit down. All right, so we were talking about imperialism. So imperialism is what's going to be a big catalyst, and we had a video on it just not too long ago, where all these countries have territories overseas, and they want to take them from one another because they've kind of reached their max resources, and the only way to get more, there's no other places to go colonize, is to take it from one another. So if they go to war and they beat another country, they can take their colonies from them. And last but not least, I'm going to say that about 5 more times, nationalism. So nationalism is both a unifier and a divider. So if we go over to this picture here, we can see nationalism. Pay no mind to the arrows. We'll talk about those in a second. But World War One kicks off because of this area here called the Balkans, where we have Austria, Hungary, Serbia, Albania, Montenegro, I don't know if I already said Bulgaria, Romania, right? You have all these different territories that are controlled by Austria at this time. Start identifying more with their heritage as far as their cultural makeup, being Serbian. They don't speak Austrian, they speak Serbian. And their cities are Serbian, and they're not necessarily Austrian, but so the nationalism that takes place in Serbia is going to lead them to go to fight the Austrians. Now let's look at Germany here. It is one whole country here on this map, but really before the war, Germany was a bunch of different principalities that joined together under nationalism for a common German peoples and a German country. So in that political cartoon we saw not too long ago on that test, we saw nationalism was both a magnet and an explosion. It can break countries apart or it can bring them together. And we see both examples within this war in itself here. So this all kicked off with the spark of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. He gets shot right here in this picture. Also his wife, but people forget about his wife, by the 18-year-old Gavrilo Princip. He is part of the Black Hand. He had tuberculosis and he was going to die anyways. So Gavrilo Princip kills the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which kicks off a bunch of events here, which is starting off with Serbia and Austria. That all these countries, because of the chain of alliances that has already been formed, instantly Russia is at war with Germany, and Germany is at war with France, and because they invade France, England's at war with Germany, which is at war with, which means that also at war with Austria. And so this little 17-year-old is really the one who kicked off and changed the world the most, in my opinion, as far as a young person. Not for the better, by the way, but he still did some crazy stuff. Hashtag get a rooftop car. Him and JFK, right? But characteristics of trench warfare. This is something that they're going to talk about a lot on the Regents is the characteristics. They focus on that more than anything else besides the technological advancements. The characteristics are here. You can see that you can actually tell the line and the height at which the shells were set to explode, and they cut down this entire forest of trees. You see mud. You see duck boards, which are these pallet-looking boards. Not a fun time, especially running across all that. There's no cover. They would just send waves after waves and waves of men to go across that. In the middle here is actually a picture from Ukraine showing you that this is an issue and characteristics that endure throughout time. Is for better or worse. We see that this soldier is standing in knee-high water, which is going to lead to trench foot. And also, I'm going to guess he hasn't taken a shower, which means he's susceptible to lice. The diet can't be that good when everything is wet and soggy. You can see on the edge of this that there are trees that have been cut down from shelling or bullets. They are literally redoing World War I in certain spots over there. And then top right here, we can see how all the men line up. And these are actually soldiers, I believe, of the Harlem Hellfighters. It's a group of African Americans who fought for France. The reason why I say that is a bunch of black soldiers and a white officer here, and that was characteristic of their unit. And sound like a bullet, but we have. Well, it's just the car starting. Yeah, so those are some characteristics of trench warfare. We're going to break down more so with the technologies. With this map, this is also interesting. You don't need to know the tactics per se, but we saw how we changed the Earth when we go to war, and you can see here. This is on the right is a picture from World War I where you see the trenches zigzagging like a zipper to make sure that the shells and explosions don't go past 5 feet. And on the left, we see a trench from Ukraine, which looks exactly the same, especially as you look at the bottom left part of this picture. It's the same exact trench formation, and it's something that is enduring throughout time, and that's why we learned it, and that's why I kind of think it's going to be on the Regents, because these characteristics are eerily similar. It's been 3 years since the war started in Ukraine, at least the second phase of the war, so that's about the time when the Regents will start adding those issues onto their tests. So what's some important stuff here, the outcomes of the war. After the war, Germany loses. Surprise, if you missed that, you weren't paying attention. But Germany loses, and they get severely punished through the Treaty of Versailles. It leads to a lot of embarrassment for a very proud people. It's rough. And it also leads to rapid inflation in the Weimar Republic, or Germany at the time. Inflation's so bad that you're burning the money instead of buying coal, because it's more efficient to do that than because it's not worth anything as far as a dollar. Through the Treaty of Versailles, they were required to pay, I think it was like $300 billion in damages at that time, which is a disgusting amount, and they just started printing off asinine amounts of money to meet that mark. And that was exactly what Woodrow Wilson didn't want to do. And we'll get to that in a second. The League of Nations is created. That's basically like our modern UN. They're meant to stop global conflicts before anything comes out of it, because we saw how bad conflicts are and how deadly they are. It's unsuccessful. The United States doesn't join it. Germany and Japan just leave it, and then they go to war with the United States and the rest of Europe. So it's ineffective, but it is a precursor to the UN. Woodrow Wilson's 14 points is shared. I don't think this is going to be on the Regents, but if it is, number one, I'll be shocked because it's U.S. history. But what it does do is it lays out how we're going to treat the Nazis after World War II and the Japanese, and why we haven't had a major war, global conflict in over 50 years. So another result is the victors are going to acquire colonies around the world. The United States at this time gets colonies, so does England, and those colonies that the United States and England acquire are going to become ports where Japan goes to invade. So Germany loses all of its colonies, which is also a significant source of income, and the victors get the spoils, and they get to take those colonies. And the part that the Regents is going to 99% of they're going to talk about this is going to be the warfare technologies. So at this war, you have a war that starts off with cavalry and single shot guns, and it ends with machine guns that can mow down entire peoples, like we see in the Battle of the Somme. Planes Planes were invented about 10, 20 years or so before this, and now you have planes that can shoot guns out of them. At the beginning of the war, people used to just drop these things like lawn darts, flechettes. I showed you a picture of them in class, I believe. And they would just drop them on the people and hope to hit them. Halfway through the war, they invent that gear I showed you where they can shoot through a propeller on a timed gear that makes it so that they won't hurt their propeller. And it just goes to show how, like, when we're at war, we do invest a lot of money into the technologies around war. America's #1 exporter is weapons. While we're at war, well, we're not at war, but Europe's at war in Ukraine. You can betcha that they're doing some advancements. And I'll get to them in a second. Gas attacks. That's a new weapon that's horrifying, and it's a crime against humanity now. Don't necessarily use them too much. I won't go into that, but another thing is protective helmets. It's slept on, but before the war, people wore pointy caps that were cool looking and just regular old hats. And by the end of it, you see armies using like metal, steel. Eventually, they use Kevlar helmets to protect their heads, and it saves a lot of lives. And it also protects them from shrapnel, and that's a technology that actually helped them. Communications at the beginning of the war, they used doves and pigeons to send messages back and forth. By the end of the war, they're going to be using telegrams and telephones, not the same cell phones we have today, but at least better than doves. You can shoot a bird out of the sky, so and then you can find out what the enemy was going to say. And that will also translate into civilian life. So you'll see telegram wires and phone usage going back into the civilian sector and spreading throughout Europe. And then the one that most students like are tanks. Tanks get invented at the very end of the war. It helps the English win barely. They kind of stunk back then. But if you imagine a bunch of men running across the field with no cover, if you told them that they could run behind a tank instead, they're going to be pretty happy. Or be inside the tank, they'll be pretty happy. But when we look at how these technologies continue to advance, in World War II, these tanks are going to be significantly more important. But also in modern day times, in Ukraine, tanks are being used, and they're not as important because we're watching 15 teenagers in Ukraine strapping explosives to drones and flying them into the tanks and blowing them up. So you have a tank that's worth $80,000 to $800,000, depending on which Soviet era it's from, and you have a drone that you can buy off Amazon for $200, and they're flying them into these tanks. And that the Ukrainians' ability to adapt and use technologies against the Russians is the reason why they haven't been overrun yet. And so, which is another reason why I think that this issue, the warfare technological advancements, is going to be on the test. It's a really big deal in modern times. All right, I'm out of breath because I'm rushing through this, but last but not least, I say that so many freaking times, I gotta stop saying last but not least. What's another way to say that? And finally, we have enduring issues. So we have power, conflict, interconnectedness, inequality, human rights violations, trade, innovation. All of these could be talked about on the enduring issues essay if it's related to World War I or different types of conflicts. Power, if the countries wanted to show their power over each other. Conflict, it's a stinking war. That's a conflict. Human rights violations, the gas attacks and the treatment of one another are eventually going to become human rights violations, and I'm thinking human rights violations might be on the test this year. It's kind of where I'm leaning towards, but we'll find out. And again, the one I think is the most important is going to be innovation, where you see new technologies being created, having positive and negative impacts, and then you see that technology get redesigned and created again and over to where we are today. That's it for this video. Hopefully it actually saved. If it did, you're going to see this. I'm going to be super stoked. And then I'm going to make the World War II video next. If you're paying attention and you're watching this, you're going to be all right for the test. Just keep doing what you're doing. If you know your friends aren't, tell them that they're big, sad losers and they should study more for the test because they want to pass. So let's get the World War II one going. I'll have a Regents one for you here soon. Stay safe. I'll see you guys on Tuesday, which is eerily close. All right. Peace and love. Bye. And let's see if I can quickly save this video before I lose it.